Hello, my name is Anthony Wall. There are judges and prosecutors who are refusing to identify themselves properly with police forms, retired Weathersfield police chiefs and ones who work for fire departments. And all natures of campus, even fire and medical, that it's concentrated fire campuses and medical and military. They run into high life aggressions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the names next to those campuses. Harvard Hospital increasingly has people tied to and has a Jonathan Mariano and people associated with him, and Aiello's Kitchen and Demoro's Market and other people next to Harvard Hospital through time, including some KKK themed, Confederate flag themed, Latino themed Weathersfield police with the name Mendez involved falsified police reports as a means to pretend they know me and pretend that I don't remember things. They pretended conversations with me also with the news, has roles a whole bunch of natures of organized crime and uses of people who get licenses to not tell the lies, who sell value roles, telling lies relative to illusions regarding how a whole bunch of campuses, countries, see people with the name Violet and Chloe, recorded, confess, demonstrate, confirm, sought me out. See, they hide what then you can't use those people to go, all natures of investigations, investigator, who they use and what they use are and have been used criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw. Our agencies and our courts have been fabricating audio and video transcripts, including at campuses, filmed 24/7 to replace what's actually recorded. Harper courts have a guy that it's unclear if they were honest about his name, Officer Hunter, involved with Harper courts with people at the corner of with Alina's Pizza, involved with the Daryl Sullivan and a whole bunch of people tied to him, like the name Lance Cuddy, are involved with people out of the state corrections offices, out of the state judicial branch offices, in all ages and natures of campuses. There's a Michelle Conquest, who's also one of the ones with Lance Cuddy, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, planting fake and changed communications between kids, fake ties, fake natures of ties, also with the news. Michelle Sanquest, I don't know what her formal name is now, or if she made her maiden, if she's married, but she has roles with WTNH, also with people at corners of streets and next to schools, planting predicate acts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, roles of use/S of people attaching kids and then through their lives to fake and change communications with others about of all around them too, including their family members. In other words, there's a quality of fact human nature that is maintained criminal insidiousness/hyper criminal insidiousness. And even though I'm not a lawyer, I recorded lawyers involved with them with predicate acts methods and fabricating and changing what's actually recorded and their actual motivations for it. See, these countries had to hide lies there and here. And this breaching method that was entrenched before America's founders were born. And Russia was already here, no, and Russia was already still possessed by the same breaching method. They have suburbs manifest there that look almost exactly like the ones here. And the ones here are in line with that breaching methods before America's founders were born. There were homes built. Already slavery, the torture, extortion, slavery method was entrenched in northern colonies and southern, and roles with it have been sustained. So they're making a certain kind of the breaching method showed the teachers how they needed to hide life aggressions and what was is actually recorded and use of it roles. Certain type of victim/whole hyper victim, it only allows manifest to be speaking for American history. It measured and maintained other communicated for James Madison and his plan and the founders behind him and his plan. And then they went and got George Washington agreed to use that plan. And then they came up with the phenomenon of how they counter-extorted and forced the rest of the founders to be. There are three natures of founders. There are Native Americans who were still fighting with each other how to respond, still are to this day, how to respond properly. Because we are still systems tactile ulterior from natures assignments by differences A through Z, by the human species body of individual bodies and group difference slash S. But see, now that's why it's so important, for example, where and how there are relativities involved with the black and white assigned by the breaching method and other having been and being blamed for the breaching method and self-valued. There are remote uses of roles, needs, nature, style, self-valuing, other things, others, ourselves, having been blamed for things that America's founders behind James Madison and his plan, how they communicated for us to blame it on the breaching method slash S. All those laws individually grouped together. And roles with it were only allowed to be natures of criminal insidiousness nature. And nature only allowed them to not be that and show them why and how to not be that. But the laws were valued as a means to, if anyone would speak that or try not to be that relative to things where it had everyone hurt each other or help each other and help each other exactly the way it needed. It needs the breaching method to keep criminal insidiousness natures of facts, truths, positive treatments as collusions, even real truths used for lies. Real truths used to screen lies. Motivations. Motivations are increasingly relative to negative value nature, progressions, acts, and natures, and the breaching method itself. That it knew that nature would continually demonstrate that to humanity. So it built all forms of conviction natures, private, overt criminal enterprises, three branches of government, the difference between them, intelligence, the databases they're using. Since before computers, the difference of the guilt with the names with the databases or everyone else. You know, everyone missed how with the breaching method was using that difference and the relativity of it because it comes up with the subjects. Slavery is brought up leaving out the breaching method. That's exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs. Itself left out. If itself was left out, it knows that other things, others ourselves, were communicated for James Madison to the bodies at each age of fact-checking nature, and for our founders behind him and his plan, and so we could understand. We don't understand that. See, when no one's then you can't understand the extortion of George Washington that we were supposed to be honest about as well. This breaching method, sickly distinctly from the best campuses A through Z to the worst campuses, and the difference of that, it maintains that self-value as roles with its fact-checking nature quality aspects and nature use slash S that no one wants, except for all the exceptions they don't even realize. In other words, really how and why people are forcing quality fact-checking nature. Like the news is not supposed to fake conversations with people. Now they're leaking about how they use the right to lie and remote uses of America's identity. These are people that are painted American flags and things like that, who have collusions right through administrations with the World Trade Center attack. Increasingly, people from Wethersfield tied to the name Scalora are involved in intercities with child offenders, sexual, medical, overt criminal enterprises, and private ones interstates internationally, but further hyper-foreign. And they have rules of the World Trade Center attack with people that say they're cousins of them with different last names. That has something to do with Wethersfield police, with wire crimes, with Wethersfield Pizza, and other places and names next to the state judicial branch offices like that, involved with police switching and forging names and fabricating audio and video transcripts, phone transcripts, There are people with the name Scalor. The intelligence community recorded, confessed, demonstrated, and they confirmed and sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They've been influenced to. They have roles with names at the corner of Walcott Hill and Knott Street. And they've been changing the street's name. Some people, so I can't talk about it, has something to do with the roles of Wethersfield, Connecticut, Wethersfield police not refusing to identify themselves legitimately. As one since I was a kid, who have been planting evidence is collusion/S on and off the campuses. Increasingly, people at Harvard Hospital have roles with their patients and criminals, as names have been planting evidence on all sides of my house. Like, in other words, even an algebra teacher I had in high school who repeated about sexual things about a female little girl that lived near me at the time. I never saw her in my life close up. I never even saw her from a distance. In other words, I only heard about her through others. And see, they're leaving those things. And this is on the other side, and through where and how all natures of investigators, and their campuses, they were maintained and are maintained a certain type of victim/hyper victim, victim predator, hyper predator. For a breaching method has time collusions, remote uses of their fact-keeping nature, quality aspects in nature, and wire crime methods, falsified police reports, roles of police departments that therefore are recorded. Wethersfield police recorded offensively, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders against me as a kid, and since I was a kid, and with people involved in planting predicate acts in databases, doing little tricks, and lying about the motivations of it, like a Debbie Gold is increasingly involved with people that are making confessions tied to her and their roles with whiting forensics. Whiting forensics names in state police families, interstates, involved with people with the name Cololo and Jensen and Mike Roberts, have roles with sexual offenders and medical offenders of kids. The state police has whiting forensics involved with it, with their crime scenes and their and what and a jail and whiting. There's also a jail in Newtown, Connecticut, that has rules with fire departments and medical campuses involved also, with the investigators, FBI, and other federal and international, as those names who had time roles with the principal child offender and with a serial killer, a reported serial killer. That person and names next to the body dumping spot, and relative other murders, intercities got brought up at the same time, and untimely deaths. There are proofs that this is a part of a method of murder and keeping their actual motivations blamed on other things others yourself, per where and how there are roles originally instilled that can be observed with the breaching method screening itself by using that, like white, to blame other things others yourselves for things that it did, forced roles sustaining that. And when someone tries to address it with a quality of fact human nature, people jump in with their differences, whether they're white, black, and they force that quality of fact human nature to be value tactical terrier from nature's way, which shows us we have the same colorized, different colorized at the same time. So nature's teaching us about difference. Nature's showing us we have exceptions with the halo parts of the eye. Someone who loses their eye, I forget it. God is a God variable, necessary per science to be treated as such, relative with and as the value of Boolean logic. Now, in other words, the time Boolean logic is referring to in other words, records of the past. That past was criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. It was still way worse than even now. But sometimes it's worse now but that which was entrenched sickly distinctly through different colonies, northern colonies and southern colonies, though. All kinds of international companies at the same time. The difference between that and those natures of criminal insidiousness, the overt ones, private ones, A through Z. All positive treatments, negative treatments, collusions, tactical terror, how from nature uses it the ways we know, and then hyper additionally. But we can't appreciate, where no one's allowing to appreciate the hyper additional. Can't afford to have discern. It's also where nature is a solid value, but not the way you guys have. There are reasons. You guys are forcing names to be premises at sciences A through Z. We're going to observe and learn how to think. And you're going to see uses consciously of criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature, and simultaneously the difference between that and their delusions. That would not be and wouldn't have been had once, in one country's voice been liberated enough to liberate one individual voice. Because only an individual, for example, it can depend the order of the finite. And per the law, too, we can only address predicate acts against ourselves by ourselves, especially where how the people around us, in other words, never even had conversations with us about stuff, and they're pretending we had conversations about it, because the interbranch and the foreign had collusions also with the hyper foreign, and with their roles, with their own differences. That these are the same names with their differences as male, female leaders, or their cultural differences. The Britain Superior Court still has black KKK themed in all these different countries, involved with the same ones with their differences brackets. Increasingly, people tied to Wethersfield mayors and intercities, Connecticut mayors, tied to Wethersfield interbranch locations and the names next to them, increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. Increasingly, people used there were like brief instances. I knew Eric Oliveri. He has been planting evidences and roles with federal evidences, crimes at campuses behind my back with the intelligence community, and names out of the state corrections offices and out of the state judicial branch offices. And this is also leaders of the kids from off the campuses. And the difference between that, the roles with it, because they're already sustained roles off campuses with that which was off and is off all locations, but in a way that's keeping collusions hyper additionally. And then so in the future, to stay motivated, roles keeping any individual from addressing a whole plethora of individual finite grouped and simultaneous ways that kids, adults, and elderly can look back on what we know and can look ahead knowing that and reveal answers to all ways proper. We cannot do this as science with locations, areas, and states everywhere there is a name, even as countries. In other words, the species body has a volume science that 3D systems tactile from how nature makes distinctions with differences A through Z. We can't appreciate that with our short words, let alone the projection we'll have other entertain. Forgiveness is so also because science shows us to discern the breaching method that is also what religions are partially about. We have to look where there is collusions forced. And we have enough known about American history to discern how sickly, non-distinctly, everyone was the victim of the same thing, /S. But if you start if you look at that as if you discern that as we're capable of discerning, we in other words, when people describe their feelings about the Declaration of Independence, it is leaving out and has collusions, leaving having left out, having been left out, the founding plan that James Madison and our founders had. How it worked because there was fact, nature, torture, extortion, slavery laws against every single person, sickly distinctly. It also used functionally how sickly non-distinctly would be left out by the names of the people of the sciences, even though it was value. Its value, how sickly non-distinctly people of any pigment of skin, in other words, anyone with black pupils and whites of eyes is a certain kind of victim, a certain kind of fact, nature, tortured, extorted, enslaved victim. Sensed if they try to communicate with nature, nature communicates with this. Because nature shows us how to answer questions, how to discern when people are using questions to measure and maintain adaptations as collusion/S. The kids of New York City, sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly, from the kids from the campuses in Connecticut. They are victims of tactically, consciously juxtaposed, tactically distinct natures of organized crime as roles with predicate acts with facts methods, where these differences rackets are shown needs to means to self-value the difference between the branches as criminal insidiousness, the intelligence tied to them, the difference of that. A whole bunch of different countries here. The news at the same time with predicate acts with facts next to all natures of crime scenes. Pretended just legitimate uses of rights to lie tied to their leaking how they have roles with all the countries in the news. Yukon has roles with the Violet family and other people involved with the Mazzucato family and that live on his street who have been planting evidences and been planting fake exceptions so they can pretend as collusions with all sides of criminal and civil cases, the courts at the same time, the news at the same time, to prevent, and stacking predicate acts with facts into databases with the same names with overt criminal enterprises as private ones. I only know a Christopher Walters who sought me out. It has something to do with his roles with the intelligence community at Old Weathersfield and places next to every place, like fire departments involved wire crimes with them. Has something to do with the fires in Connecticut, even if they're only natural, because they have wire crime acts and methods roles with the courts and police also with wire crime, mail crime methods, same time as the news to prevent voices. As their roles increasingly attaching kids to fake communications with their families and neighbors and changed. And increasingly people tied to the former retired Weathersfield police chiefs associated with the name Collo and the people that lived at the house that they moved into on my street named Collo. And Bob Chase from Whiting Forensics brought up the name Phil Collo. They're also sequence shifting when they speak about why and how we're using their names. They brought it up with falsified police reports roles, including the difference between the police forms roles and the court's guilty roles. There are other names involved with the guilt at the same time. Forgiveness is so we get the mandated law followed proper. They are refusing to identify themselves through different arrests and police instances. They are refusing to put things on paper because they stacked themselves already, used criminally foreign influence since they were kids. They are not legitimate roles at each age of fact, treatment nature with our governments, A through Z. And they share individually grouped and together uses of all words, therefore all phrases. But phrases like conspiracy theory, they do things like fake conversations with people, then put conspiracy theory. Other people, just like they have the presidents entertain locations, areas, and states. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, factual nature, quiet aspects of nature. People are going to speak about civility or law and crimes anyway. The whole predicate acts methods, roles with people, that associated with the families that are putting people in prisons, increasingly framing people, including the people that did things, they're changing what they did as criminally foreign influence uses of location /S, as rules of torture before the World Trade Center attack. In that context and sense, the FBI has roles with Hartford courts and the Britain's Superior Court and Connecticut's District Court. And their family members and intimate ties have roles with West Hartford locations with people with the name Doobie, tied to the name Richard Doobie. I never had a class with him, his educators, and police forms I never met, per a Cololo and a DeMoro. So now these are one of the people recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed also by leaders of my campuses. They were involved with the narratives with people from off campuses in classes I didn't even have till that were planting predicate acts with facts and fake motivations for it. Increasingly with the people with the name Cololo and DeMore and their educators. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated. Hartford Hospital has people with the name Lombardo who faked conversations with me and with people at the community center. And one of them was tied down if they faked it, and he was yelling out stuff. And then they pretended I was yelling out that stuff. And to do that, they sent it through the mail too. These are people with the Wethersfield Police report since I was a kid. Ray Collo has roles with people associated with Christopher Walters, with sequence shifts, and with people all along Hangdog Lane and Two Rod Highway, involved with wire crimes with them with various police departments and their families. Ones with the name O'Brien also involved with Sandy Hook campuses with child sex offenders, leaders of kids. These are also people involved with Sandy Hook Promise, further people next to the state capitol. I never had a class with Casper in my life. He has something to do with people with the name Potter, with the Wethersfield Judicial Branch offices, and people with the FBI and other countries all along Route 175. Involved also increasingly people with Whiting Forensics. And these are people involved with the child offenders and with mayors. And Whiting Forensics has a guy who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with not knowing, but he brought, in other words, as one of the ones who forced the principal child offender I caught first, with worse than they put him in jail for obscure pictures. And his roles with such on and off campuses and at shopping centers. There are intelligence with shopping centers and malls and their family members who had that roles to make fake exceptions of knowing me and others. And their roles with the predicate acts with facts between each of the campuses I went, the names involved. Increasingly on off the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices, foreign and domestic military tied to names Scalora, DeMoro, and Cololo have roles with between campuses and with names next to campuses, planting federal evidences crimes. These are people with criminally foreign influence uses of the Facebook page of a principal child offender roles with a Joshua Julian, also predicate acts on my street for Joshua Julian. I've never seen him on my street. He described it and his roles with predicate acts with others involved with, putting threats and having speaking threats and confessions through each other and then pretending we had conversations with them that never were. hiding what's actually recorded. Has something to do with their roles all along roads and routes, like Route 175. I'm trying to leave people's names out of this too. They're consciously forcing me to say nothing so they could bring people's names in criminally for an influence as shown needs to. Has something to do with a Paul Kelly too. It makes it sound like I know Paul Kelly. He was one of the ones that used to pretend to know me with his neighbors. Has something to do through time, then time use of it again. They have roles at Trinity College and next to it with the names at Central Connecticut State University and next to it and next to UConn and at UConn involved with the uses of the drugs in the undercover positions with the military, foreign and domestic, a whole bunch of different countries where they have, they're putting fake things in databases, fake uses of drugs by kids and adults. Even if they get them, they're putting fake things. Has something to do with their roles with the one of the connections between them is the Wethersfield Community Center. And these are people involved with in other words, the corner of that street. I don't know those people there. These are people that spy on me. And others, the difference between the spying as our side or other countries, that's also used by the breaching method. And I'm not, in other words, this is increasingly tied to mayors. This mayor Gold is increasingly roles with like a Joseph Dennis, intercities, and with West Hartford locations, and people speaking through others. Fourth, former Mayor Gold, and for people involved with medical offenders of kids, medical, sexual, and judges and prosecutors involved with this, mayors, and people tied to this Joseph Dennis, his neighbors involved with this interstates. And putting fake criminally foreign influence uses of investigators, and sequence planting as people involved with sequence ships tied to them at the World Trade Center and the court next to it and the spots next to it. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with other about the World Trade Center attack while they were forcing a principal child abuser by roles fabricating with also others that fabricated at the same time, faked and changed digital and phone communications. And they hid the confessions of the principal child defender because they had roles sustaining it. There's a Jessica Cintron that Wethersfield police recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with their sources. They didn't say that name, but they said the police chief Cintron's involved. And this is through, there's another one retired too, involved with the names Kalo and David Smith and a Jamie Smith and their mother. And they have roles with their patients and criminals, and they run in there. Some of them might be undercover, but they're putting fake response. They're saying loaded things and pretending others responded to it. In other words, they're putting, and then they're putting fake conversations through the mail that weren't at all. Then they try to make fake exceptions to cover it up. 3 times they use Hartford Hospital, record, confess, demonstrate, confirm collusion with names that planted evidences on all sides of my house, including the sexual confessions repeated by a Miss Riley, who I never had a personal conversation with. And Anthony Yagman was one of the people in the class. And a Mike DeMaine. He's also recorded, confessed, demonstrated. Both of those people have roles with doctors that also have badges and crimes with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and child offenders, leaders of the kids they had time collusions with, including digital. These are people increasingly with whiting forensics too, involved with the religious spots and their differences. With these are people that interbranch. These are some black KKK themed, Latino themed sources of some black and white female judges and their family members and prosecutors. And in other words, the differences are their differences collusion roles. That's hyper evidentially recorded. See, but part of the reason we haven't had this, the revelations that nature shows us with this, scientifically observed and appreciated, is because we have to, in other words, this showed only heard, formally spoken. Other things, others ourselves, blamed for things our founders communicated for us to blame in the breaching method. And it knew that would become manifest, where nature would be demonstrating things in parallel with that. because nature is the Constitution unabridged and hyper additionally relative to its identity of relationship to itself, nature. When it's unabridged, it shows us where and how to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and means out of nowhere. Part of those means involve us appreciating consciously the difference between criminal insidiousness natures of positives, like truths used for lies, like truths used to screen lies, like, you know, so in other words, because there's an identity, it's an identity of relativity to ourselves. How that human fact, true nature breaching method, forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, only allowed to be fathomable. The suburbs as they are a manifest design, from America to Russia to Ukraine, as they are actually manifest. Hartford Hospital has recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with Russians in Ukraine, where they have some KKK black themed. Mark Violet has some KKK themed with him along Route 175 in his conjunctions with the military, where they have roles with a whole bunch of different countries, and they're educators with identity theft, fraud, slanders, plant together fake ties to people, fake exceptions. He's one of the ones I barely know who made fake exceptions and sequence shifts and confessions roles with his, also with a O'Brien family. Has something to do with the roles all along roads and routes like Route 175 and Route 13. And these are people involved with remote uses of the sense and sensibilities of Judge Napolitano and of the online judge of Judge Janine too. And through, for instance, but distinctly, not distinctly and simultaneously, but further hyper simultaneously, while Judge Napolitano was with them, and through the transition of him not being with them, and since, as people roles also with World Trade Center predicate acts at the same time. They also have roles with uses of changing what things are about. In other words, like, oh, it's only about child abuse, or they use the Connecticut interbranch uses the word harassment, the charge harassment, for example, to sequence shifts into where they start fights and people that need to raise their voice because people are leaving out finite details and use/s of it that others can discern. On a mass scale, they're lying about why people get sensitive. And their motivations for it. Increasingly, people tied to people with the name Brendan Leahy and women and their family member and little kids have roles with sexual and medical offenders, even on digital on Facebook, with the judges and prosecutors speaking with their family members, speak fake things in databases, still tactically delusions raw too. And they won't get on paper, so I have to ask Judge Napolitano through administrations too, which records even more. They are refusing to identify themselves with all kinds of, they fishing now for more instances. Because this breaching method showed, in other words, the intelligence knows they're not going to be permitted to explain. In other words, they were never used legitimately about anything they spoke with. People who are intelligence or not, people who are interbranch or not, black pupils. This is not the only example of it. In fact, there are more being generated relative, again, to values, value progression, unabridged, the value of that. The value of understanding James Madison's plan, the founders behind him, and how that was replaced as what caused the Declaration of Independence. Exactly the way the breaching method knew. And roles are self-valued, putting truths for lies, saying it is about a T-tax. Get down. I'll gather round. Vaccines, YouTuber Anthony Wall. I teach you American things the best at countries A through Z. We will have our representation. We have none. Boxing is fun one way along. Ye species body trade will force them to follow mandated law properly. One of the things those laws were about, too, were about you entertain that, rolls with that. You can't, in other words, there is no justice because the people who are speaking for justice have predicate acts with facts, methods, roles, needs, natures, and natures of logic behind it that they can't afford to discern with that quality of fact, chewing nature necessary to liberate locations A through Z, at countries A through Z. But ours are beginning with and simultaneously as the value of our own for the hyper simultaneous. This is why, in other words, so we have to be led by the hyper invisible but still discernible. You guys, that's why this preaching method keeps everyone needing to debate with the invisible but still discernible dishonestly. Keep the nature of debate appearing to things that are debatable that aren't even debatable. How to control AI. What the value of the intelligence behind it is. Where it came from. Vaccines. I teach us things, location/S law. Unabridged. This will change. Follow Mendy's course. Force to judge in Palatine. They have his Facebook page involved with this. Or Fox News. In other words, they try to start fights with or make themselves, they make others do that to keep the other names involved. So there are people from Korea also involved with this. I don't know at all. Barely it was in their presence, and that was to make a fake exceptions and the difference between the guilt of the people from the intelligence from Yukon. As families, Yukon families have roles with intelligence families at Central Connecticut State University in Yukon, and New Britain, Connecticut. Yukon is in Storrs, Connecticut, and the same families are Mark Violet and others and others who have roles with their educators in high school and with predicate acts, with facts, identity theft, fraud, slander, sequence shifts, planting fake things in falsified police reports roles, crime scenes roles, and hiding roles with foreign bodies. The next to Trinity College too, and they used that was exploited at boxing gyms. Connecticut boxing gyms have had conversations with people that live in other cities. They had conversations with people that live near me and tied to them. They have roles of predicate acts with facts, with the judges and prosecutors speaking fake things in databases with them since I was a kid, and with people with the house before them. As their roles next to the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices, also wire crimes with Wethersfield Police, Wethersfield Pizza, with the Wethersfield Police, refusing to identify themselves, fabricating phone transcripts, increasingly with people with the FBI involved, and whiting forensics with state police. Has something to do with the state police ties to intercities and interstates, with people with the name Jensen, Mike Roberts, a Ray Reynolds, a Joe DeMoro, as ones with the name Smith and Cololo, who have judges and prosecutors in foreign bodies and medical families fabricating evidences and putting fake things in databases with themselves and with the news at the same time to prevent people on writing properly. Get them on paper. Let's go. They put me in fake aggression too at the hospital to cover up what I caught them doing here on my street 3 times. Let's get on over with it. Totally fake conversations with me with lay family and people tied to them. They forged names of foreign doctors because this is also involved with the foreign doctors have time collusions. In other words, and the difference between the foreign where they fight internationally, grouped and together in their negotiations, what they call positive industries, they're still currently foreign influence. They don't have patriotism here or there. That's legitimate. Because the locations, areas, and states are criminally foreign influence, fact-checking nature, styles, aspects, and nature. I'm not even a lawyer. You're going to discern. There's a Trantolo, and Trantolo is one of the lawyers recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed involved with WFSB, and with medical and sexual offenders of kids, leaders of kids, forced roles. Also, they have delusions involved. I barely had conversations with them. They have roles using the words like conspiracy theory and roles fabricating audio and video transcripts with WTNH and with courts with their family members involved with child sex offenders, like courts, prosecutors, and judges. There's a Brian Silver who's one of the ones involved with all sides of cases and in the World Trade Center attack. And so, in other words, they planted evidences with the Keene family through time tied to this and his roles with their neighbors and people with like within on Church Street in Old Weathersfield, increasingly involved with intercampuses predicate acts and fake conversations with me, including a Dr. Gilmore, a male. I saw him in my life. In other words, I don't know what he looks like. He's involved with a Christina Sioka and people with the name Mendez were involved with campuses intercities with child sexual and medical offenders of kids, including the same names with courts and federal involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, not legitimately with the acting professors. And these were our roles with recorded conscious uses of individually grouped and together the departments of Central Connecticut State University used criminally foreign influence, and with the names at Trinity College, who had time collusions with them with World Trade Center predicate acts after the World Trade Center too and before it. See, the Hartford courts and the Britain Superior Courts, families, and the Connecticut District Court, people associated with them and their family members before the World Trade Center attack, they effected confessions to me and requests for help, including foreign and domestic military, including a Kuwaiti general's family is involved with a Dean Keys, and you can't make that up and pretend that it's a joke. Like when it's not a joke. These are people involved with differences, rackets with religions too, where it comes to deans, where it comes to responses to where and how there are impositions sickly distinctly upon the people of the cities, where and how the suburbs were designed tactically denatured to cause people to need food, resources, and systems self-valued tactical terror from natures. and from other locations, tactical terror from how nature communicates with that too. When where and how nature communicates the difference between hyper positive and positive too, because nature shows us there's a difference between criminal and insidiousness natures of positives and or uses of them, like pretending voting is our voice, who we vote for. In other words, just because that's repeat. In other words, they're preventing mandated law, and and the quality of fact-driven nature needed to liberate it. Its quality aspects, nature means out of nowhere, better than free. We could afford to discern and that and how it is nature itself was telling us to claim the zoning laws that are supposed to protect us. Instead, they are being and having been self-valued, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, weaponized, entrenched tools to keep all natures of potential, all natures of self-valued possession slash hyper possession relative to the descriptions properly by our syntax and by that which is demonstrated to us as that which binds the sciences unabridged, its identity relationship to itself and the value of that. It shows us. So in other words, please, follow mandated law and don't pretend not to see they search for it means to pretend not to understand people with the people who prevent short words over the phones. The interbranch recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Also, they have the collusions with that. Through time, they've been attaching kids in databases, fake communications with police departments. They have roles with the worst uses and the worst furtherance of overt criminal enterprises and private ones interstates. And they've been pretending other because they've been roles with all natures of differences, brackets, where and how they were showed needs to pretend they could speak for their sciences, A through Z, including the law and their practices. So even the branches, in other words, black pupils, everything is individual, grouped, and together tactical terror from how they want us to appreciate it. because they're a certain type of victim slash hyper victim. Otherwise, they were sentenced. This is why people are crazy looking out from the perspective of people that go into sports a lot of the ways. Because a lot of the times, the people that were going to go into sports, because a lot of people agree that the sciences are criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, rot, and we can discern this. A lot of people agree simultaneously too that they will change and take our words if we try to speak that for ourselves. And people jump in and pretend not to believe us dishonestly on a mass scale for a variety of motivations. But there is also the recordable, discernible, singular breaching method slash S being and having been that is a part with that, because it would be overcome by nature itself and ourselves individually grouped together. The second we follow mandated law properly, care, not leaving out the breaching methods roles. What really causes the kids of New York City to grow up and be part of gangs and kill people? All truths are used for lies, and that was self-value by the people roles of predicate acts with facts from off their campuses, predators, and keeping predators hyper additionally there. And the difference of who's worse with that relative to instances increasingly used to leave out the other names involved. Increasingly, along Route 3, intercities, people tied to the name Demora, involved with social media crimes and predators, also with the name. There are people that confessed roles with child offenders, sexual and medical, and drugs and medicines crimes with Weathersfield Police Facebook page. There's people with the name Shumack. There's a Joshua Shumack, also involved with a Joshua Julian, per Mark Violet, and his brother, and they have roles with military next to the state capitol, and people also with the a Czech Casper, who I never had a verbal conversation with. He's been planting evidences with a former Mayor Gold and people from my grammar school. And there was a teacher that lived near me that which taught at the grammar school, and he wasn't my teacher. They made one big exception when he was a sixth grade teacher in the other class, and they had me go in there, and he had us come back the next time too, and bring a make mold grow on bread. And so I brought it in, and then I opened it, and he got mad and made me throw it out. And he didn't explain to me that I didn't even know about mold. He's trying to put fake things in databases, even though I had his older kid who was older than me. That was in sixth grade. He was a sixth grade teacher, Mr. Burstein. I had hit his older kid with a stick. But there had also been already people involved with organized crimes with the kids. The same names involved with the World Trade Center attack, and the names involved intercities with tied murder confessions and untimely deaths roles. Also, they don't even know it was communications about that. But that's what's recorded. Time to, and for example, the murder of Greg Kyler, even if it was made up, all the people tied to him at the time, and probation officers, you can't lie about that. You could lie about it, would be criminal, but people involved with that, with intercities, with next to Trinity College, are connected roles per the people next to Central Connecticut State University, who also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have roles with prosecutors and judges that have been criminally foreign influence uses of those locations through time. On a mass scale, they fake and change what was recorded and what they heard, and they further fake things and what they think and heard, and sequence shifts. Increasingly, people tied to a subject Bajaria have roles of identity theft, fraud, slanders, and his educators with the intelligence community next to Central Connecticut State University in Britain, who have roles next to campuses in Wethersfield with predicate acts, federal evidences, crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake motivations, why, and with names next on all sides of the community center. These are people involved with the corrections offices and judicial branch offices and their family members too. Ugh. And further, he has roles with that principal offender and more sexual and medical offenders of kids, like with the name Leahy, as their own kids involved too. And in other words, please get them on paper, one name and sequence. Let's go. I want a response for their retired Wethersfield police chiefs, and they faced conversations with me as a kid that weren't at all. And there's one when I was adult. They had one of the Saudis. They forced collusion also before the World Trade Center attack. In that context, and since with the ones named Mendez, Intercities next to Fox Connecticut News, they have collusions with Thaddeus Skabowski and one's named Domain with sexual and medical offenders of kids since they were kids, as one's putting fake conversations as adults with of other adults. They had roles and backgrounds they weren't with kids they didn't even see around. They never even had the classes with them, and they put fake exceptions. Like with Eric Mendez, they tried to make 2 fake exceptions of me knowing him. He's roles with other Mendez families and members with falsified police reports when he was a kid and now as an adult, and their roles with wire crime acts and methods. They put fake transcripts, and they're changing what's digitally recorded also with the FBI. There's a Joshua Stryker involved with the others, a whole bunch of people with the Joshua Stryker. A whole bunch of people confessed to Joshua Stryker as one of the ones lying about himself and others behind people's backs through time. It has something to do with their roles with the state judicial branch and people planting evidences into campuses with them, and with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, time collusions with them. They are not legitimate roles with Afghan leaders and kids. They are not legitimate roles with Korean leaders of kids. They're not legitimate roles with Thai leaders of kids. These families are collusions too. Pakistan too, increasingly involved with the World Trade Center attack. All kinds of predicate acts at campuses with the names involved, also at corners of streets. Increasingly, people tied to a Joshua Stryker is involved with corners of streets with near me, people tied to him with predicate acts with facts, fake ties to me, fake natures of ties to me. And these are the police forging and switching names, and with the courts doing the same at the same time with a whole bunch of other countries. See, they locked them. The breaching method showed them they couldn't go back and discern a quality of fact afford to be, let alone to protract the quality of fact nature proper with theory, let alone convictions. Yeah, I teach you here.